Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this amazing present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Relieving Pain with Presence. And I selected this topic because it seems really relevant to me personally, as well as I've been seeing it a lot in clinic. And everyone at some point in their life goes through pain, whether that's physically or emotionally or both. And since it's such a common thread, such a common experience, why not use presence to relieve pain? There's no side effects. There's no chance of becoming addicted to presence. I mean, and even if you were addicted to presence, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I guess you can see where I'm going with this. It's a more natural remedy to treat pain. And I think now is the perfect moment for this because of the opioid crisis. So many people are looking for pain relief externally, and presence gives us the opportunity to look within. And I'm going to walk you through some steps that you can use to help relieve the pain that you're experiencing. And again, pain comes in a variety of different ways, a variety of different forms, and no one goes through life unscathed. So whether you're in pain now or not, this podcast should be relevant and quite useful. So before we kind of jump into it, I'd like to reframe the word pain, because pain is pretty much the ultimate form of discomfort. So instead of saying I'm in pain, what I'd like you to say, or at least think about saying, is in this present moment, I'm experiencing a certain level of discomfort. Because if you use an I am statement, you're basically taking ownership, and if anything, you're exacerbating the conditions that you're experiencing in that moment. So instead of saying I'm in pain, let's kind of negate that out of our minds. And I know that it's knee-jerk because that's how we let people know that we're hurting. And we're gonna do some reframing. I think that's gonna be a really helpful tool to get things going, because I am statements are so powerful. And pain is certainly not something that you want to identify with. It's not something that you want to co-create. It's just not something that you want as a part of your reality. And there are easy ways to alleviate that, and clearly there are ways to exacerbate it. So let's really focus on that in the beginning. And so let me go into physical pain. Physical pain is certainly a challenge in this reality. And it's hard to live with physical pain. It's something that none of us want to experience. None of us want to watch other people in physical pain. Yet we have these nerve receptors, these pain receptor cells all throughout our body. And they're sending signals to our brain, and our brain is interpreting the sensation, the impulse that receptor cell is signaling. So what do we do about that? It becomes really easy to get triggered when we first initially experience pain. And one of the things that I talk about in clinic, and something that I remind myself, is that in the initial onset of pain, that's when it's most important to be present. Because in those moments, it becomes so easy to get triggered and get shot out of the moment, because you become resistant. You don't want to experience what's being presented to you. And then it makes you start thinking about, well, when am I going to be out of pain? How long is this going to last? Why is this happening to me? And then you start thinking about the last time you were in pain. And all that does is take you out of the present moment. That is not helpful. So what do? Well, if we're being super present, we learn how to greet the pain. This is a very valuable tool, and it is definitely something that I implore you to look at and to implement. And that is a question that I ask in clinic a lot, because especially lately I've been treating a lot of body pains, back pain, neck pain. And I ask my patients, how are you greeting the pain? And that's a question, it definitely triggers a lot of thought, because it's not something that we spend a lot of time contemplating, like, what did we do on the onset? All we want to do usually when we get in pain is to get out of pain. But the duration of the experience that we have depends upon how we're greeting the pain with presence. And so what I suggest is to ask yourself that question: how am I greeting this pain? And that's a question for physical or emotional pain, but specifically physical pain. So you have a pain in your body and it shows up. What is your first response? What is it triggering? What thoughts are flowing through your head? You have to really be the observer. So the best thing you can do is learn how to greet it in a more positive way. And it might sound strange to say, well, how can I be positive about pain? Well, if you get into a state of resistance or combativeness to the pain, then it's going to only exacerbate and extend the painful experience that's being presented to you. And it might take some practice to wrap your head around that and to put it into play. But you can change the experience based on the way that you're greeting the pain. Really, it could take some time to get that down pat. But you're going to have plenty of opportunities throughout your life, throughout your waking moments, throughout your present moments, where pain will present itself. And by greeting it, it means that we're allowing it to flow through us. So if we're being super present, we also understand that nothing lasts. So as we're greeting the pain, we're also reminding ourselves that this physical pain is not going to last. And it's going to take that kind of insistence. Really, it's going to take, you're going to have to converse with yourself, sometimes out loud, and say, look, how I'm feeling right now, it's not going to last. It's going to be okay. It's going to pass. I just have to hang in there. And that kind of discourse with yourself is very important, because if pain shows up and you get combative, you're basically fighting yourself. You're fighting your body. And that's a very slippery slope, because who wins in that fight? No one. You lose, because not only is the pain showing up, you're fighting the pain, you're getting taken out of the moment, you're getting triggered, you're in fight or flight, and you're releasing cortisol, inflammation, and then you get just stuck in a loop. So my suggestion is, the next time a physical pain shows up, and you don't have to look for it, trust me, it will at some point, because everyone who has a human body will experience pain at some time during the day, week, whenever. Greet it positively. Speak to it. Ask it what it wants from you. Be present with it and watch it. Breathe through it. It will pass. It always has passed. But if you're going to rely on pain medications, that's really just treating the symptom, not necessarily the root. And, there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with taking pain medication, but, and I understand there's a time and a place for it. If you're in 9 out of 10 pain, 10 out of 10 pain for an extended period of time, yeah, you need to take some pain meds. Fine, I get it as a stopgap. But it's more important to learn the tools on how to change the pain experience with presence. So you won't have to have a reliance on pain meds, which are just masking a deeper issue. And, when the pain meds wear off, you're exactly where you started from. And eventually your body builds a tolerance, and then you need more and more. And again, that's a very slippery slope. So we want to reframe pain, first of all. So we're going to say that, we're in discomfort. We're going to take away that I am statement. And then we're going to look at how we're greeting the pain in that present moment. Are we being really present with it? It's okay in that present moment to be expressive, to cry, whatever you need to do to kind of let it out, but be with it. Don't let your mind get the best of you. Don't let your ego, thought stream take you out of the moment and make you think things that aren't necessarily true. Yes, no one necessarily likes to be in pain, but everything is relative to everything else. So sometimes, pain is teaching us and reminding us what it's like to not be in pain. So another way to reframe and relieve pain is to look at it as a teacher. Yes, it's a rather unpleasant teacher, but that's a perception by itself. It's just teaching you something about you. And you have an opportunity in those moments to really look at it as a learning opportunity if you can stay present through the painful experience. Now, you might think that emotional pain might be different than physical pain, but it's really not. Emotions, they're very powerful. They are. And a lot of times our egos are stoking the flames and want to trigger us into feeling different feelings to take us out of the moment. Emotions, just like physical pain, are not permanent. They will pass. But we get so wrapped up in them and we just create more. We negatively manifest. We negatively co-create more painful, what we perceive as negative emotions. If you can experience an emotion, but stay in a flow state, be super present, reminding yourself it's not going to last, reframing, using all your tools, however you're feeling in that moment, you have the ability to shift out of it, shift into more of a balanced state. And you could use all your different presence tools to help, calm yourself, to still yourself, to anchor yourself into the moment. Because, there's going to be some moments you're going to enter into that, your emotions are going to be warranted. If you enter into a situation that's very upsetting, very frustrating, or very angering, if those emotions have to do with the moment that you're in, they're totally justifiable. But again, you have to be really present with them. You have to reflect inward to say and look at yourself and say, does the way I feel right now in this present moment have to do with what's unfolding in front of my face? If it does, yes, you're justified in how you feel. You're fully entitled to be experiencing that emotion, be expressive, however it is. But as soon as you leave that present moment, you have to leave the emotions that had to do with that moment there. So if you're in a present moment and you're experiencing emotions about a past moment, or for some reason you start feeling some anxiety about a future moment, no, there's no entitlement to those feelings per se. And you have to really check yourself and ask, why am I feeling this way? What is this about? A lot of times it's just your ego trying to take you out of the moment, trying to make you think things that have nothing to do with what's going on in the here and now. And that's where your presence tools come in. That's where your observation comes in. That's where your clarity comes in, so that you can really let that go. And it might, it's easy to say, and I understand that, because sometimes when we experience emotions, they completely wash over us. But if we're doing our work, if we have a very strong presence practice, a mindfulness practice, we're able to pull ourselves back to the moment, because we established that strong baseline that I talked about in the first few podcasts. And that's a very valuable tool to implement, is the mindfulness practice, because you start your day that way. No matter what you're experiencing throughout the day, you have that waypoint. You have that point of stillness, that point of presence that you can work your way back towards. If you find yourself constantly getting pulled out, it would be certainly helpful to look at how you're starting your day. Are you starting your day with presence? Are you using your presence tools? What's going on? And just kind of work from there, but certainly don't be too hard on yourself. I'd like to share my experience, my painful experience, and how I was able to work through it. I think that maybe some people here will find it relevant and insightful, and I think it's appropriate for me to share at this point. So a couple days ago, I went through a rather stressful situation in a present moment, and it was emotionally stressful, and I felt like I worked my way through it. I was able to use my tools, and I needed support. I asked for help, and I felt okay. There was certainly an emotional arc, meaning that there was a beginning, middle, and end, and I perceived that I was pretty much through the emotional experience of it. But a few hours later, I started having some really significant body pain. My neck and my shoulder really started to become, I was in extreme discomfort. I was pretty much in 9 out of 10 pain. And I could be a little sensitive to pain and discomfort in general, but I'll tell you that this was rather significant. And it pretty much, the onset started around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And there's really nothing to do and nowhere to go at that point except to really sit with it and work it. And it did at first catch me off guard because, consciously I thought that from the emotional standpoint, it was okay. I was okay. But my body started showing me that I was not as okay as I thought I was. And so every time I would turn my head, I would start feeling these like lightning bolts shoot down the side of my body. It was very interesting. So I made sure that I was being super present through the whole experience. And this went on pretty much from 9 p.m. to the next morning. I really only got 2 hours of sleep, but I kept on pulling myself back. I was in a very specific state of observation. And yes, like I didn't necessarily like it per se, but I just don't think that the universe is so concerned with what I like, more so what I need, and really what I'm accepting. And it's hard to, when you're in the throes of physical pain, it's really hard to sit there and accept what's being presented to you. But to me, it was integral because, like, if anything, this was a very powerful reminder of how to work the steps, how to be present through extreme discomfort, to remind myself that it wasn't going to last. And I didn't want to make it any more difficult for myself. I didn't want to start triggering my emotions and getting really frustrated and sad and depressed about the pain that I was experiencing in that moment. And so I just kept on having to check in with myself. I had to converse with myself. I had to be empathetic and compassionate and loving with myself. But I did that all in the present moment. And, it was very powerful. And it seemed, the timing seemed very interesting because I was planning on speaking about pain and presence for this podcast. And it just seemed like the universe laid it out so that I could have that experience. It could be really fresh in my mind to be able to talk to you guys about that today. And so I was able to get through it. Yes, I didn't sleep much, but that was okay. I used all of my tools, every single tool that I had. And, eventually it started to taper off a little bit. And the next morning I was able to go see my chiropractor. He was able to take me down from a 9 out of 10 to a 4 or 5 out of 10, and then it slowly started to decrease. And I am so grateful for his work, but, I'm really grateful that I was able to use all of my presence tools to get me through an experience like that. You might think that, well, does it really take that kind of experience for you to really honor that, pain? Sometimes it does. Because again, if everything's relative to everything else, how am I going to know what it's like to feel great if I haven't had the experiences that I had of extreme discomfort, of pain itself? And I was really watching my words as well. I didn't want to make any I am statements. I didn't want to take any ownership of that experience. No matter how bad and intense the pain was, like I was really just watching what was coming out of my mouth. I was watching how I was talking to myself. I was really, again, staying in a state of observation. And, you can really only be observant with clarity if you're being present. And so I am thankful to the universe, but more so I'm thankful to my body. I love my body. I accept my body. I understand that sometimes things are going to come up, and who knows, but if those things come up, I'm going to deal with them in the present moment. I'm not going to allow my mind to get the best of me and shoot me into places that aren't helpful and create scenarios that aren't helpful. But that's the work. That's what we're talking about here. And regardless of whether it's a physical issue, physical pain, physical discomfort, or emotional pain, emotional discomfort, you can use presence to help relieve that discomfort. We don't necessarily need an external source if we have all of the tools to treat ourselves internally. And it is our internal condition that reflects outward, not outward inward. So that's why we always want to work on ourselves. We want to treat ourselves better. We want to talk to ourselves. We want to greet whatever's showing up with presence. Again, it doesn't matter if you necessarily like what's showing up. It matters that you accept it. So acceptance is a wonderful tool when you're greeting pain or discomfort on a physical level or an emotional level or both. And so, as I reflect back, I can see how my experience was definitely fortuitous. And I don't look at it with regret or frustration or anger. I just look at it as it was a bunch of present moments that were opportunistic for me, so that I can reflect back and see how I was progressing through that arc, through that experience, through the beginning, middle, and end, to make sure that I wasn't getting stuck anywhere in there. And that's where the observation comes in. And every time I felt like I got a little stuck, I would look at it, I would talk to myself, I would hug myself, I would be, the compassion, the acceptance, the empathy, all of that. I used all of that for myself. I parented myself. I did everything for myself, to myself in those moments. And it all worked. It worked. And yes, seeing my chiro the next day, of course, that just solidified it. That put me back into alignment. That alleviated the pressure that was impinging upon the nerve roots, because I ultimately believe that that's what was taking place. But regardless of whatever the physical experience was, whatever, the mechanical experience was, I was working the steps, and I was putting into practice everything that we have spoken about for the past 49 podcasts. And so that's why I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to talk about these topics, and ultimately presence, because, presence, it was my medicine in those challenging moments. And I used it, and it gave me the relief that I needed and the clarity that I needed so that I could get through it. And I wasn't trying to escape it, as bad as it hurt. And 9 out of 10, that's pretty significant, and I am not one to embellish at all. So when I say that, I mean that. But I knew it wasn't going to last. I knew that there was going to be peaks and valleys. I knew that there was going to be an apex moment, and then it would slowly taper off. And that's what I'm trying to impress upon you, is that no matter what experience you go through, good, bad, or indifferent, it's not going to last. There's going to be a beginning, middle, and end. If you could just stay in that state of acceptance, that state of presence, having clarity, being observant, not listening to your ego, your life will be easier. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it'll be easier. And at the end of the day, that's all we can ask for. Because who knows what life has in store for us. And we don't really need to be privy to that. We just have to be in each single present moment, accepting it for exactly how it is. Asking ourselves, greeting, what is it that this moment is asking of me? What do I want to do about this in this moment? That's the value. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the work begins, and that's where the work ends. So I hope that this podcast was helpful for you. I am sure that there are many people out there in some level of pain or discomfort at this present moment. And I implore you to use these tools to help alleviate the suffering, the self-inflicted suffering that takes place when you're out of the present moment, when you're trying to escape it, when you're resisting it, when you're fighting it. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. And it just elongates your experience. And again, there's no right or wrong here, because your life is subjective, as is mine. But if we can all be a little bit more present, if we can all keep on pulling ourselves back to the present moment, life will make more sense, and all of those rough edges will be smoothed out. So I want to thank everyone again for listening to this podcast, and I want to welcome you back to the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.